So, Ronaldo, welcome to CTO Confessions. It's great to have you on board, sir.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you for having me. Much appreciative.
Brilliant. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And who do you work for?
Yeah. For the last 24 years, I've been at the intersection of technology and finance, delivering measurable and innovative solutions to investment management firms. It's been an exciting ride. My career spans both functional and leadership roles, which really is how I'm able to bridge the tech and the business together. So I lean a lot on my past experience, both as a technician. I first started off as a help desk technician, answering phone calls. And this was before we even had remote control tools. So you can imagine guiding somebody to click on an X in the upper right-hand corner and then click on the start menu and right click. You wouldn't imagine many times I would say, no, not left click, right click. So it was definitely a challenge. But as the years progressed, I was able to move up from help desk to desktop support, to server administration, to management, and then eventually to the CTO role that I've been in at an alternative investment management firm. These past 24 years have been so many projects. It's been digital transformation, a cloud migration, data governance, cybersecurity, which is always on the forefront of any leader's mind. Automation, that's a big initiative that we're working on now. We've been working on it for the last couple of years. And then, of course, there's generative AI. So there's never any rest. There's constantly movement and evolution that's happening within the tech industry.
Yeah. It's a bit mad. I've mentioned this a few times in the past. You're like Time Lords. You have to kind of manage what's happened in the past. You have to manage what's happening right now and also where you need to go in the future. And everything's changing all at the same time. So it's a pretty intense role.
Very much so. If there was one thing I could really change about IT, it's that software had a shelf life. And on a certain day, that software would just stop working. So you'd be forced to deprecate these legacy systems. It is by far one of the biggest challenges that I think leaders have to deal with. So.
Do you know what? I think that's a really good idea. I think being a software engineer in the past myself, when you do look at these legacy systems, it is actually quite frightening, actually, legacy systems, because the people that wrote them have gone. They might still be around, but they're not around. The documentation for them, because everything moves so fast, is not always as ideal. I'm going to use that polite word there. And they're kind of still sometimes the backbone of many companies.
Oh, by far. I think airlines, power plants, they all run on these legacy systems, Windows 95. So can you imagine the horror when you go in there as a support specialist and you see systems that have been deprecated, end of life, end of support 10, 15 years ago? It's very, very interesting. Very interesting.
That's actually shocked me. I didn't know that. That's quite an interesting thing. And that's pretty amazing. And as you mentioned, the cybersecurity is a huge thing out there. And it's a serious threat. I hear this all the time. This is top of minds, and to handle that is quite challenging. So. I just want to step back to the industry that you're in. You kind of mentioned that you're in asset management, so what does it mean to lead tech in that space?
Yeah. The running joke that I have at the office is the only location or the only industry that is more fast paced than money would be an emergency room. And rightfully so, because emergency room, you're dealing with life and death. Right. So when you're dealing with money and you're moving at the speed of money, you have to move quite fast. So working at the investment management firm, working in finance and investment management firms in particular, is it's a very fast paced, very direct type of industry, on 24/7. So you have to be in a position where you're available 24/7. You have to be in a position where you're implementing processes that can run 24/7. One of the things that I don't think many tech leaders focus on anymore because it's not as glamorous. And that's with the vendor management and the end user experience. If you were to spend, in my opinion, 60% of your time focusing on those two areas, the rest would really just kind of resolve itself. as a medium-sized firm, we rely so much on vendors, whether they're MSPs, whether they're specialists, to help us with projects and move forward with projects and maintain the environment.
Oh.
And then at the same time, the end users are on the receiving end of this. So when the vendors fail, we're kind of the proxy between the vendors, the MSPs, for example, and the end users. So when the vendors fail, guess who has to hear it? Us in the middle, because we're the ones that contracted these vendors and we're the ones that are managing these vendors. And then the end users, of course, had no idea who these vendors are. They don't have access to them. So they come to us and they just really, they unload and they express their frustrations, disconcern. So in my opinion, as tech leaders start to come into this industry and they see the glamour about generative AI, LLMs, DevOps, they should really focus on the vendor aspect and the end user aspect, and they would go such a long way in succeeding.
Okay. It seems like common sense to do that. I mean, so, and the old saying, common sense is anything but common. So what's your kind of tips around making sure that does happen and they are at the forefront of what we do?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, when we talk about vendor management, number one, for at least I want to preface this by saying I speak from the medium-sized firm perspective. Larger enterprise organizations might have a different view, and smaller mom and pop shops obviously might be in a different position as well. Maybe they don't have access to the type of budget that you need to really build out those relationships and have the initiatives that are needed, or for various other reasons. But when it comes from the medium-sized organization, it's about the relationships that you have with the vendors, and the type of vendors that I usually gravitate toward are more boutique shops. I'll have the owner's phone number, direct access to senior management, dedicated technicians, named dedicated technicians to us. So that aspect is very important for us, and that's how we've managed. That's how we've dealt and managed with our relationships with these vendors throughout the years, and it's tend to work well. They're vested. They have they have these relationships with you that span years, if not decades. So they have a vested interest in ensuring that the projects are completed successfully, that you're providing the type of service that you are requesting from them. You had asked about the finance industry and some of the nuances in that. Well, I can tell you that it's very high touch, and where that stems from, I don't necessarily have a comment about that, but that type of high touch has to begin from the vendor side, coming over to the client and then to the end user. So, in my opinion, working in my experience working at different industries, finance definitely tends to be one of the most high touch that I've experienced, right, compared to other industries. So there's definitely something different there. Yeah.
And so how does the tech kind of play a part in all this? You kind of mentioned the end user experience, the vendor experience, and AI, because obviously AI is kind of everywhere. It's a kind of big topic. I can imagine it kind of fills up most of your kind of headspace and conversations, especially at the rate at which it's kind of keeps on changing as well.
Yeah. When we talk about the tech, I have another saying that I often talk about around the office, which is we have enterprise needs, but we don't have the enterprise staff, right? So you have to kind of manage how do you implement and identify a solution that has all the functionality and feature set that's required in order for you to meet the needs of the business.
Yeah,
be competitive with your obviously with the industry and with your competitors, but at the same time, how can you balance not overworking and overburdening your existing staff that maybe you don't have a staff of 25 people supporting an infrastructure. You might have a much smaller staff, but these enterprise solutions require a dedicated individual, or at the very least, 30% of their time on a weekly basis. So that's really where the challenge happens from my perspective, finding that balance between a software or a platform that could provide 80% of the features and functionality that you would have in an enterprise system, while also keeping enough bandwidth and proper workload with the team to keep them motivated and not stressed out.
All right.
So it kind of goes back and forth. When we talk about generative AI and AI in general, what I would like to see, and what I've started to see now in more of the platforms that we use, is the introduction of AI, sprinkling a little bit AI on top of existing platforms to help automate and make the technicians more efficient, because they're able to provide end solutions much faster, whether it's some type of solution, whether it's Copilot, for example, integrated into Microsoft Azure, but where you can tell it what you're trying to do, and then it'll assist you in that process versus you trying to find it out manually, or alternatively Googling for half an hour trying to find a solution. So there's different ways that I'm seeing generative AI coming into existing platforms that are making team members more efficient and alleviating some of the pressure and the workload on those team members.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I can, having worked on automation, not with AI, back in the day when I was doing software, AI was just a twinkle in somebody's eye in terms of usability anyway.
Our main focus is to automate as much as possible. And it's not with the intention of going through an attrition with either the IT or the business staff. It's more to make team members more efficient, right? If I could, I would have a bot working alongside each team member on a daily basis, automating tasks while the team member does manual tasks. So if you think of two monitors, have one monitor, you have a bot running a process for you, one after another, and then you have another monitor where the team member is working on those manual tasks that the bot can't automate. So automation is a big focus for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine that creating those automations is an investment in time, but analysis and whatever, because you've got to get it right. Managing that's quite a tough space, especially when you've got different team members with different ways of doing things. I can imagine. How do you lead in that space?
Yeah, that's a great example of how you have to work closely with the business. First of all, if you simply went to the business and said, "Hey, I want to automate your processes," you would get a litany of different workflows that may or may not be of value. So number one is identifying all the workflows that are candidates for automation, and then filtering those workflows so that you have the most valuable ones being raised to the top. So that's a crucial item. Those that are raised to the top then obviously get priority, and you're working with the business designing what's called a process design document, and then a solution design document, so that you can then automate this. And that can happen through robotic process automation. That can happen through machine learning. It can happen through generative AI. There's different automation tools. Really, if you kind of look at the crux of generative AI and LLM, it's almost to an extent an automation tool, just like robotic process automation or machine learning. So when you look at it from that lens, it's much easier to try to slide it into the overall processes and initiatives that you're working on within the firm.
Yeah. Okay. And I imagine that the tools, because they're ever evolving, okay, how do you commit to use a particular tool? This is a question of mine, actually, because I appreciate the difficulty, tech leaders have in this space. When you're in you're working in an innovation storm, trying to innovate, but you're innovating with the tools that are being innovated as you're trying to apply them, if you get my drift. How do you engineers get very excited about new tech and toys, because being one myself, how do you kind of temper that and make sure that you're getting, good business value out of this stuff and picking the right stuff?
Well, you definitely should be choosy, in particular about your tools. I have another saying, which is, if your tech team needs 17 tools to deploy code, you don't have DevOps, you have chaos. It's a Rube Goldberg machine. You're trying to integrate 17 tools just to publish code to an application. So we try to keep it simple and the fewer tools possible. Now, with that said, you have to really look for leaders in the space, or if it's a niche market, you have to look for those bespoke applications and boutique shops that are servicing that niche market. After you do a bake off and a proof of concept, which is a luxury because you don't always have the time to do a proof of concept or to really go in depth. Having a lead time of 6 months or even 3 months for a particular project is not sometimes realistic. The business wants it and they want it now. So you have to move once again at the speed of business. But in an ideal situation, you would do your research, you would identify the top leaders in that space. And then from there, you would do a proof of concept. After the proof of concept, deployed in your environment. Hopefully during that period, your team member was upskilling and learning about it. And then once it's in production, you're able to begin utilizing it.
Yeah.
So it has to be a methodical approach so that you can bring in the right tools without overwhelming the team and right sizing the tool set for the size of the team. Going back to something I said earlier about enterprise needs, but medium-sized staff. Right.
Yeah, that's quite a challenging space there. You're trying to get the efficiency. And I guess this is the interesting thing is that when you are kind of forced into a bit of a corner in terms of limited staff, limited resources, it's amazing what as human beings, this is what we are good at as human beings, is we get innovative and we get very smart. We get very out of necessity, so that's really interesting to hear. I can imagine that you're kind of bringing on teams. I've got a question noted here around, what strategies have you got that you found most effective around, taking teams and from the ground up, and is it more? And the other question on top of that is it easier starting up teams, or is it difficult scaling them up?
When you think about it, I think part of the hope with generative AI is that the reliance on us is going to be reduced somewhat. We're going to have, let's give the example a little bit off topic, of autonomous cars, right? We're going to have there's be less reliance on drivers having to drive, accidents happening, traffic jams. And with autonomous vehicles, we're going to be able to just sit in the car, leisurely take a ride to your destination, play with your phone, read a book, look out the window, whatever the case is. Well, that kind of translates as well to teams and generative AI, if you ask me. We want to see how teams can become more successful. And part of that is giving them the tools to do so. And generative AI, I think I think the tech industry on the service side, not necessarily the platforms or the software, but on the service side, is ripe for a disruption and a change. The MSP business in particular, I think is going to have a big surprise in a couple of years as generative AI becomes more mature. Now, with that said, you're still going to need capable, successful teams to work alongside these tools and implement solutions on behalf of clients or your business users. So I know one of the things we're going to talk about is some books that we recommend, and I don't want to kind of jump ahead, but there's a book that I always swear by, and that's called Leaders Eat Last. And it's by Simon Sinek. And that book really talks about applying emotional intelligence to being a team leader, using EQ so that the team you're leading with the carrot and not with the stick, right? The team, I don't want to say admires you, but the team respects you, I think is a more accurate word. And with that respect, they're willing to go the extra mile. They're willing to deal with the tough times and the good times. So really it comes down to accommodating your management style, where you're using EQ and you're making slight modifications based on the personality of the team member that you're working with. And I think that's what leads successful teams, right? Definitely. And especially when you're in an area where you're bound by constraints. Once again, going back to that enterprise needs, medium-sized staff, like how do you bridge that gap? So you really have to be empathetic and work with the team to set realistic goals, define a clear mission, and just kind of not be best friends, but also not be in a situation where they don't feel that they can confide in you and they don't respect you.
Yeah. Have you got any confessions around that in your journey to this understanding? Because I can imagine that a lot of leaders, including myself, who've ended up in leadership spaces, haven't learned this or haven't been taught it. It's kind of like you got to go into the battlefield and kind of learn the lesson.
You do. I think some individuals have an innate ability to lead. Others definitely have to learn it. Based on the industry, there are some nuances that are involved with that. I can tell you from my end, I've seen personalities ranging from individuals that just want to please you as much as possible. And even though they mean well, the outcome isn't the ideal outcome. And then you have other individuals that are just so obstinate that they refuse to change their minds, or refuse to operate in a different manner that is more conducive to a holistic and a healthy team, like persona, a healthy team, feeling. So some individuals just are set in their ways, and that's it. That they refuse to change any other way. You definitely have to be flexible as a manager, and try to identify how you can not only identify areas of improvement, but also the good that people are doing. So easily we tend to forget someone might have worked hours and hours of overtime on the weekends and overnight, especially in the IT industry. Most of the work that we have to do when it comes to change management is after hours. Nobody's making changes during production. That's crazy. So a lot of people are giving up. A lot of techs are giving up, and developers are giving up their nights and their weekends so that they can maintain the business, right? And we can continue moving these projects forward. So one time they might not, provide an ideal outcome. You don't want that to overshadow all the other work they've done. Assuming that this is a good team member and this person genuinely wants to try their best. So it's something I try to keep in mind. And when I talk to younger directors and managers, I try to remind them, hey, let's not only talk about what we can do to improve, let's talk about what we are doing good and make sure people get rewarded and recognized for that effort.
I think that's right. It's very easy to fall. I think you're absolutely right. An opportunity of leadership is also to celebrate what is good and really shine a light on it, and ring those bells, kind of thing. Here we go. As we're on the topic of leadership, what's the unseen psychological weight of leadership that you quietly carry, Reinaldo?
Oh, stress. Well, a lot of stress. But it goes back to how you manage, right? How you manage the process. You have to first trust in your team members. Why do you hire these individuals? Why do you have them working with you if you don't trust them? So micromanaging is definitely an area that it's going to be very hard to succeed if that's your approach. Once you build that trust with team members, you have to believe in the process. Implement processes, whether it's ITIL, whether it's ITSM, or whether it's Agile, Waterfall. You have to implement processes that are tried and true, that are proven. Allow the team members to execute on them. Be involved where you're receiving updates, but not to the point where you're micromanaging the process. And then from there, just let it run, right? Finding a healthy work-life balance I think is a challenge for many professionals and many leaders, but it's something that you have to constantly strive to. It's just the way you have to approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody referred to work-life balance as work-life integration, because we don't work standard hours anymore now. It's kind of it's like you're slotting everything in to get that balance right, and that's tricky for some of us anyway. Where we like structure. We want to know when we start, when we finish, and then then we know it's kind of clean. But when there's this kind of fuzziness there.
It goes back to what we were saying earlier in regards to the relationship between the vendors, the client, and the end users, right? So if you have an MSP that's supporting you, you're in the middle, you're trying to make sure these end users have a good experience. Part of having that work-life balance, I think, is minimizing the stress and the breaks. you're never going to have a perfect network, perfect environment, perfect development project. That's not going to happen. But you can definitely, by leveraging processes, you can and having the proper partners that work with you, you can definitely lower the amounts of stress that you're dealing with, and kind of controlling the chaos. We've had a lot of good experience with our vendors. There's one in particular that has worked on a lot of our projects. We're intimate with them. They have a deep bench of skilled individuals, and we've had a lot of success with them. There's been another firm that we've worked with where they're more focused on the end user experience, and they provide what's called kind of like an IT concierge. And when you think about it, the MSP industry is on a race to the bottom, and it's not a race to the bottom in terms of reaching an endpoint. It's everyone's trying to provide the same service at a cheaper price to get your business, but there isn't any focus on value and quality. Some of us are willing to pay a 5%, 10% premium to get that high touch, that quality, and that premium. And finding MSPs or partners that are willing to do that is very difficult these days because it's such a competitive and saturated market, if you ask me. And then the clients like us end up on the receiving end of that, and it's just a very bad experience, very bad user experience. But working with some of the vendors, that we have, fortunately, from that project based firm to the IT concierge group, we've had a lot of good experiences. And I think the stress over the years has really been reduced because we've worked so intimately with these companies.
Brilliant. Yeah. That's an interesting point around how, because everybody's chasing to the bottom, for a cheaper price and what have you. And sometimes, try and sell that unseen value, the quality, the turnaround. Any tips around that? How you communicate across?
Well, there's a great book that's from the early 90s or 2000s, and it's The World is Flat. I think it was Thomas Friedman, and he talks about offshoring, right? How we've moved our service sector to India and the Philippines. So when we talk about a race to the bottom, they're able to accomplish that because of the offshoring, which is great. I don't have any issues with offshoring. I think it makes sense in many scenarios, as well as nearshoring too. But you really have to find that balance, whether that might be some developers stateside and another group of developers offshore. Don't know. Maybe management there and management here. I'm not sure, because that's not necessarily my responsibility. My responsibility is to make sure that I'm delivering to the business when projects are asked. So for any advice I can give to these development firms and MSPs is that don't just look at the price, at the margin that you're getting on the sale. Look at the value that you could provide to your client, because that's really how you're going to succeed. That's how you're going to find that type of following your success from your clients. So it's definitely a challenge, but I think it's doable. It's just you have to manage the process, right? Great tech leaders don't just manage systems; they mentor people and they manage processes.
Yeah, it's a people. All leadership is a people thing, but I think people forget that tech isn't all about tech. It's actually about the people that do the tech. And I'm just kind of thinking, actually, how you describe what you do. So let's say, for example, Reinaldo, you were at a party and somebody came along and said, "Hey, what do you do?" How would you explain what you do to people that maybe not in this industry?
Sure. Yeah. I bridge what the business needs and the tech together. So you have a particular process or a type of business that you're trying to accomplish. Let's say, for example, you're doing bank debt. You're purchasing bank debt, and you're trying to manage that whole portfolio and that whole process. Well, instead of using Excel, the good and old tried tool of Excel, we can bring in a digital platform that'll make you more efficient. That can automate 20-30% of the process, reduce human error, which is very important when it comes to regulatory filing. And from there, you're off to the races. So having the ability to bridge that gap between the business and the tech, I think is where I bring value. And we've been talking a lot about leadership as well. Well, there's a leadership aspect behind that. It just doesn't happen magically. The tech genie isn't snapping his fingers and all of a sudden that platform is up and running. You need individuals that are going to execute on this and be able to implement it. So being able to manage that process and lead that group is also where I bring value and able to, to accomplish this.
Brilliant. That bridge is quite an art, because you got business talk and then you got tech talk. We both have their importance, and bridging that's another level of your role, really. So it's tough.
I'll tell you, there's some unseen heroes in the tech and the business community, and those are business analysts. Business analysts are sometimes the individuals that will take that business talk, especially like in the finance where you're dealing with complex financial instruments, and then be able to translate that into tech talk. So the developers and the technicians can execute on that. And those individuals don't get enough credit. If you ask me, it's pretty cool how you can straddle the fence and be both kind of like a quasi developer techie, and then also a business user, right? Where you understand that business side. So those individuals are definitely unsung heroes in my opinion.
And that's a really interesting point for people that don't quite understand what goes on behind the scenes under the cover of, leading tech in companies, is that there is this constant trying to, bridge the gap between what's needed and what is possible within certain budgets and resources as well. And with the existing system, the legacy systems that we mentioned earlier on, how do we integrate that stuff in? So I think, big shout out to the analysts out there. I think they don't get mentioned often enough. And so hopefully those listening out there feeling proud of the work that they do.
Absolutely. If there's one thing I would ask for the industry and the world to recognize, it's the value of IT. If it seems seamless to you, that means that a lot of people did a lot of hard work to make it work. So I don't think it's appreciated enough, the hard work that goes behind tech these days, because it just seems so seamless.
And coming back to a point you made earlier on around the end user experience and the vendor experience, this is where analysts come in again, because in a way they're kind of looking out for that need as well. They're trying to represent. So question actually, Reinaldo, on that is that how do you get the actual end users and the actual vendors to become a strong feedback loop into the work that you do to what the analysts do, so that we're delivering what's needed?
First step is to get them into the same room. Let the end user describe their challenges and the end goal. Have them buy in, right? Very important. I can't tell you the number of projects that we've worked on where we've invested substantial amount of time and monies to only find that the end user was invested. And I often also say this, which is IT cannot unilaterally implement solutions. It's a partnership between the business and IT. Technology is there to empower the business and to give it that competitive edge, make them more efficient and automate as much as possible. But it has to be a partnership with the business. I understand finance. I don't understand it to the level that maybe an analyst does or a portfolio manager. So that's really where that partnership is so crucial. So once you get the business into the room with yourself and maybe a solution expert, a subject matter expert, at that point, defining the roles and the goals is so important. Otherwise, you're driving without a destination. And we never want to have that be the case. We always want to have clear deliverables. What is it that I can give you? And let's break it down into manageable chunks, phases. And then from there, we can do agile development. Or if it's an infrastructure project, we can deliver it in phases. And those goals are both measurable and expectations have been set. So the business really has to participate. The notion of, well, IT should just be able to figure it out is a misnomer, and you're doing yourself and IT a disservice because you're setting us up for failure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine there's some common kind of, I don't know, is there some common traps that cause people to kind of lose that destination, that Northern Star that we're heading towards? Because I'm speaking from personal experience, and I've seen things go very off at a tangent, and then everybody stood around going, why are we doing this? Or there's a murmur of it, but it's not being addressed.
Communication. It solely comes down, in my opinion, to communication. Once you have those goals and the timeline set, you have to, if anything, over communicate to your team members so they're engaged. Now, many a times working on projects, we have team members that won't even attend meetings. We'll have Teams meetings set up and they don't participate. So definitely it's a challenge. How do you communicate to those team members that refuse to participate in the process? Sending email updates, talking to them one-on-one is different ways to mitigate that. But you have to keep them engaged. You have to over communicate so that it's clear. You can't bombard them with emails that are 2 pages long. Nobody has the time to read that. In the world that we live in with Instagram and TikTok and Twitter, everything is just bites. Give it to me in bites, but manageable bites that I can digest, and I can immediately see what the result is, right? So overly detailed emails is, someone's going to look at that. They're trying to go home to their family. They're trying to finish the work that they have on their plate at the moment, right? All you're doing is just adding more work to them. So being able to be succinct, being able to deliver the message in the fewest possible words is an art. But it's something that definitely people have to master in order to be successful with their communication. Yeah,
absolutely. I've got a leader that I'm working with at the moment, and they call it packaging it up. Package your stuff. Because and you're right, it's an art, and we don't have these conversations often enough. It's almost like communication, the layer that kind of binds us together and able to do what we're doing, and awareness, what have you, is so left to chance.
I can tell you that one of the quickest ways to have a user disconnect is by using techie jargon. They have no idea what, I don't know, IDLE, ITSM, Agile, ZTNA, like all these different solutions, they have no idea what that means. So you have to speak the layman's language. And I'm not doing this to be condescending in any way. It's just, you're not in the tech industry. So why would you even know these terms? If I start throwing different terms at you, if you did it to me, if from your respective industry, I would be confused, right? So I think speaking speaking in a manner that team members and business users can understand or resonates with them is an aspect of that is often underlooked.
Yeah, I remember coaching a business owner around this, and I kept using the word agile. And in the end, we had quite a good trust layer going on, the cycle. And he said to me, if you use that word once more, he says, I'm gonna wrap something around your head. He kind of knew what it was, but he kind of didn't. But he wanted to speak in the language that he understood, because he didn't want to do that translation. So that was a good lesson for me, and it was one I learned quite fast. It's almost like you have to kind of bring the level, and again, it's not condescending. It's talk at a kind of child's level, not you see the point, is to be able to get over the ideas, and then you can have the conversation around that. But we often do, all of us do it in our industries. We talk the language that we do in our circles, and it makes us feel kind of good and maybe a little bit clever, but it's not clever.
In my experience, most individuals are smart enough where they understand conceptually what you're speaking to. You just have to speak it. You just have to say it in a manner that they can envision it. And using, to your point, using terms that are or nomenclature that's specific to our industry doesn't do them any service. Right.
That's good. Here we go. I've got a tough one for you. This got on the theme of CTO Confessions. Okay, what failure has taught you the most?
Coincidentally enough, I would say it's literally the topic we were just talking about, which is having the end user buy-in. There was definitely several projects throughout my tenure, my 24 years of doing IT, where there wasn't enough buy-in from the business. It wasn't valued enough. We thought, hey, let's just push it through so that we can get to what we thought was the finish line. But what's the point of building a car if no one's going to drive it? You have it sitting in a parking lot and you went through all the effort of assembling this vehicle, designing it, architecting it, and now nobody's actually using it. So if there's one thing I would look back, reflecting on my career, it's, the moment you see that end user participation is not there, you have to just pause. You have to pause, you have to regroup, and you have to see if it's still even something the business wants, right? Are you having regular touch points? Is the business participating in a meaningful manner that will allow you to bring this project to a conclusion, and they themselves will receive value out of it? And if not, there's nothing wrong with cutting your losses. It's a sunk cost. And then from there, moving on to the next one. Never be afraid to fail. If anything, fail fast, right? Catch it early and then move on to the next one and keep doing that until you find that success.
Absolutely. It reminds me of when I did my project management kind of training, and one of the things they taught you in there is that always question the business case. The business case is always the definer in this. Is this, and if it's not a business case, if it's an internal function, you just got to look at that. Does this still apply? And to be really ruthless about it. And it reminds me of Warren Buffett, when he talks about what made his success, it was not what he said yes to, it's what he said no to, It's that focus of energy. Yeah. So, tech leaders listening out there, absolutely take note of this, giving up on something and not being married to it, if it's not working is a very, very good thing to have in the space.
Absolutely. Now, if you repeat that 20 times in a year, you're doing something wrong. That should happen far and in between, right? There should be the process that you're managing should be built in a way where there's regular touch points. The value is clearly identified and you're able to catch this early. So in the end, there's only 2,048 hours that we work a year. So we want to make sure that amount of time for a standard FTE, we want to make sure that amount of time where we're using the majority of it wisely. So it's, but to your point, yeah, definitely. If, when you see a project is not progressing in the right direction, stop, pause and regroup and see what you can do to correct it.
Yeah. It got my mind thinking about the essence of Agile. That's what Agile is trying to do, is to be adaptable. And adaptability does mean pivoting sometimes, It does mean stopping. It does mean pausing and reflecting on the situation. So yeah, we've got all this stuff in our toolboxes, we just need to use it and we need to enforce it and talk about it and have those conversations. So yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to great tech leaders don't just manage systems, they mentor people and they manage processes. So focus on the people, focus on the process. The rest falls in place.
And that brings me to a point of leadership around delegation. So, often we think of delegation to other people, but what you described there is a beautiful delegation to the processes. Delegate some of your leadership to be kind of ingrained into a process that you trust and trust people to follow. And that allows you to not be micromanaging, but to kind of manage on a meta layer.
Agreed. I think micromanage stems from a lack of faith and a lack of trust. But if you have the right people in place, if you have people that want to do good, there should always be checks and balances. I'm not saying hire someone, give them a project, leave, come back 6 months later. Okay, is the project completed? That's not the case, right? We just talked about with the business how we have challenges where participation is not always there. Well, participation has to also exist internally within IT between the management and the resources they're delivering on those particular projects. So having a set cadence where there's whether it's a stand-up scrum, a daily scrum, whatever the case is, where you're constantly meeting and discussing the progress and the deliverables is crucial. But you have to have faith in the system. You have to have trust in the people. Otherwise, why did you hire them? Why did you bring them in here? if you're just going to micromanage them and torment everybody in the process.
Yeah, we forget that, don't we? We've got these valuable Ferraris and what have you. You're not going to drive them in like first gear. You need to trust them and use them to their best value. And they resonate with that. Many people want to be given that autonomy. Again, coming back to the whole essence of things like agile, which is to kind of champion that aspect of work environments and the way we work. You mentioned earlier on that you've got quite kind of a high level of what was the word you used? Stress kind of thing, because it's a kind of tough environment. What habits have you got from a leadership perspective of how you kind of handle that and keep that in check? What's your way of navigating high pressure environments?
Yeah, well, personally, I'm a staunch believer of never let them see you sweat or cry, right? So you could be dying on the inside, but make sure nobody can ever tell. And I think that's something that has served me well throughout the years. Look, we all deal with stress. It's inevitable. You're put in situations where you're being challenged, which is good. I always want to be challenged. I always want to challenge my team members as well. But it can cause stress as well, right? You're trying to balance personal life with work life. You're trying to meet deliverables. You're constantly being bombarded with new initiatives. While existing initiatives are still in flight. So it really comes down to how can you internalize this in a manner where you are able to compartmentalize the stress. You're not bringing it home. You're not releasing it on your team members and causing them additional stress, which then could derail a project. So, I think finding that balance is very important. There's a great book that helped me a lot with this, and it was named The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And this was by Robin Sharma. Great book when it talks specifically about balancing life. And I believe the story was that he was a lawyer at a large law firm, and I think he had a heart attack, or he was just completely, his health was failing. And it's because he wasn't dealing with the stress properly, right? So you definitely have to find a way where you can manage the stress, whether it's by exercising, by doing another activity that helps alleviate it, and then being healthy yourself, right? Having healthy habits, and then from there that actually translates that translates at the office. It translates in your deliverables. Because if you're in this array internally and health-wise, how could you possibly lead a team to success? It all starts with you. Unfortunately, there is a hierarchy. And I say unfortunately because we want it to be a dispersed responsibility or a democracy where everyone has kind of an opinion and a say. But in the end, the CTO is the one that's being held accountable. So as a result, you have to be the leader. You have to be the one that is pushing these initiatives forward and ensuring that every team member is meeting their part while being satisfied, while being content in the work that they're doing. Right, having those regular checkups with your team members.
My de-stressor, as you kind of were talking there, reminding me, it was running. I like running, and I do hot yoga as well now. So, that kind of seems to, release a bit of steam. Mind you, it's pretty steamy in those hot yoga pods. What's your trick? What's your kind of vent to?
Yeah, exercising as well. I have a friend. I don't personally do it. He does the hot exercises. There's one particular franchise over here where they have these small little saunas, and inside there they have a bike, or you could do Pilates. You can also do yoga. And I tried it with him one time. I have to tell you, it's interesting. It definitely sweating your tushy off for 1 hour is something new, at least to that extent, because of the amount of heat. So it's definitely something interesting. However, for me, I think just working out, spending time with the family is really how you're able to de-stress. And as a CTO, and especially in the finance industry, we're online 24/7. So even when you are relaxing, you're always on the forefront, at least not on the forefront per se, but in your mind, you're thinking about that project. You're thinking about, that task that I didn't write down, that I didn't create a ticket for. I don't have a JIRA for it. So it's always coming to mind work, but having the ability to go back and come back to the present, come back to the time that you're spending with your family, come back to the time that you're in the gym. That's what's important, not delving on it and just dwelling on it and just completely letting it consume you. So it's something that you have to learn, in my opinion, throughout the years on how to find that balance. But once you have it, I think that's really what allows you to have longevity versus that burnout that I think many people see. There's a running joke in the tech industry, and I don't know if you've heard this. It's you never see a senior citizen technician or developer, and it's because it's a burnout industry. We're working so hard, we're delivering 24/7. I think at some point people end up either changing careers, retiring early, or I don't know, scaling back somehow, right? But I hope to have the longevity and make it to the end, because I definitely love this industry. This is the best industry that, in my opinion, anyone can be in. It's so interesting, constantly evolving, and it's a hobby that just became a career. So unfortunately.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that you don't see many kind of more senior people in tech. I guess they kind of, I think many leaders that I've worked with, they want to do something with their hands, because tech is very abstract and whatever. So they want to get to the real stuff, the gardening or the woodwork. I've got an obsession with becoming if I could do it all over again, I'll probably become a carpenter or a joiner or something like that,
To show how true you are, I had backyard chickens for many years. And when people often ask me about it, I would say, look, I spend so much time in the digital world that working with the earth and with animals is so rewarding, and it's such a stress relief. So yeah, we had several flocks of chicken for a couple of years, and it was such a great experience.
Brilliant. That's really good to hear. You've inspired me, actually. I've got plenty of room for chicken, so I think I'll be...
I'll head over, we'll build a chicken coop together, and we'll get some chickens, and we'll be all set.
Excellent.
Fresh eggs every morning.
Yeah. And coming back to the topic you mentioned, being present in the present moment. So I'm going to do a share of a book, which I think is absolutely fantastic. It's very deep, so I do to apologize if it's not for everybody. But it's The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if that's one you've read on your book, but it's about getting to that present moment. The only thing that we really have, actually, it's the only time that exists, which is now. And it's coming back to that because, with tech and all the busy world that we have, we've got, our attention is always being pulled away from the thing that only thing that matters. So yeah, I encourage people to do that. I used to walk around with some post-it notes for exact that when I was a project manager, because I'd have those ideas and I think offload it, get it out of my head, so I'm not juggling it, and that seemed to help quite a lot. So that's my tip around leadership.
I like to say that the concept of multitasking is a fallacy. It doesn't really happen. You're working on one task at one given moment. Right now, I'm speaking with you, TC. 5 minutes later, I might be doing something else, but I'm not doing multiple projects at the exact same time. Now, you could argue and say the concept of multitasking is that you're managing multiple tasks, not exactly at the same time, but within the same time period. So that is possibly true, but let's think about it. How much value do we lose in context switching? One of the concepts about Agile is reducing context switching, because there's a loss every time someone has to stop their focus on that particular task they're working on, now regain focus on another task, and then, try to move forward with that, right? So the human mind is an amazing tool, is an amazing machine. It can switch at a on a dime, but really to get true value, I try to structure projects where my team members can work on have a dedicated amount of time that they can work on a particular project, deliver it, or at least a portion of that project, and then move on to something else. So we try to reduce the amount of noise. And Kevin Leary talks about this a lot, which is signal and noise. You have to reduce the amount of noise that you're receiving so you can focus on the signal and deliver quality to the business.
Beautiful. Great words. So any other books that you want to share as part of your journey that you think would be really good for people to hear about?
Yeah. To recap, the two that I had mentioned, and I'll talk about the third one. The first one was The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, right? So great book, Robin Sharma. finding that balance both personally and also work on the work side, so that you can live a healthy and productive life. Leaders eat last, using emotional intelligence and empathy to be the best leader. The old saying of leading with a carrot versus a stick is ever so true, nowadays. And then lastly, the Phoenix Project. So if you're familiar with theory of constraints, I believe the original author of that was Eli Goldratt, who created the whole concept of theory of constraints. Well, the Phoenix Project was written by Gene Kim, Kevin Baer, and George Spafford. And that book really talks about what we deal with on an everyday basis. You have one individual that knows how to do everything. That one individual, when he's out of pocket, everything comes to a halt. Nothing is documented. Everything is in the head and the mind of this individual. So, there's that whole of constraint that happens when you're trying to get a project and you're relying on that one key resource. So how can you disperse the knowledge? How can you disperse the responsibility so that team members, and this goes back to a topic we were talking about earlier, which is stress management, so that team members have the ability to take off if there's a family emergency. Team members have the ability to take time off or whatever the case is, maybe work on a side project because you're distributing the work properly. So definitely theory of constraints, TOC, is something that is so important when it comes to management, agile. And that was that one book in particular, I think really changed the way I approached management overall. So a lot of credit to them.
Brilliant. I'm proud to say, I think I should get some points for this. I've read all three of those, so excellent. Great shares. They really, really are good books. I do encourage people to pick them out. I think it's good that you brought the monk that sold the Ferrari as well, because I think we always forget, it's not always about tech. It's about getting that balance, as we've mentioned a few times in the podcast, because you don't want to get to that point where you're burnt out and all that stuff and work you did, it becomes irrelevant. You want to be able to celebrate what you've done and to feel good about it rather than regret it and all this kind of stuff. So that's a great shout. So you've already mentioned earlier on the genie. I'm going to be the tech genie for a second. I'm going to offer you that wish. What are you going to wish for, Reinaldo?
I do actually, I did mention one, which was the value, right? I wish people would value IT more. The fact that it's so seamless is it speaks to how much hard work is done on the back end to make these solutions work seamlessly. So, and I can't express that enough. I can't express it enough. People just want recognition. They want recognition, and taking a moment to thank your technician or your developer on the amazing work they're doing can go a long way. The other one would be for that single pane of glass. I think all CTOs, all technicians, all developers really would love to have a single pane of glass where they can see everything of value when it comes to managing their infrastructure, managing their development projects. Right now, we're bombarded with just tabs. In my browser, there might be 20 tabs at any given moment. And that's 20 different areas of the firm that I have to look at to make sure that we're secure, that projects are moving along, that user requests are being addressed, that I'm delivering on metrics. So definitely too many panes of glass. Let's just get one. I think Microsoft with the Azure suite and the old 365 is definitely moving in the right direction, but it's not there just yet. And then lastly, we had talked about this before, which is the MSPs just racing to the bottom. I wish they would stop. I wish they would focus less on the profit margin and more on the value that they're providing. And I'm not seeing that enough. Unfortunately, for those that don't have large teams and rely on the vendors, which I think more and more CTOs are doing, we're just faced with challenge after challenge after challenge. In my 24 years, I've moved from managing infrastructure and development projects to managing SaaS and IaaS and vendors. So it's definitely been a big shift. And wish the tech genie would come in and just snap a finger and take care of it.
I'm going to work on it for you. I think the very valid points. Hopefully, people listening to the Wish also will start to kind of work on that and to try and iron out some of these things. But I think one thing that I am going to do more of, which I'm already doing, is the recognition. I do champion engineers. I don't think engineers get enough recognition. And I'm going to throw scientists in there as well, because the world that we live in is created by engineers and scientists. And it's all, it's all very good that, the salespeople and the marketing people are going to get this kind of limelight, and it's good that they get it, but, give some of it to the actual people that do the work and come up with the ideas and really, burn the midnight oil to make it happen. So yeah, engineers rock, scientists rock, champion them. So as a genie, that's coming true. So as we come to our final full stop of the podcast, unfortunately, Reinaldo, what's your final key takeaway that you'd like to leave our tech leader audience out there?
Yeah, it's something that I said throughout the discussion here. Be a leader that leads, that manages the process and leads the people, right? I think you'll get so far by doing so, especially with the uncertainty and the excitement of generative AI. Even more so now, you have to reassure people that they're not going to lose their jobs, right? That we're implementing tools to help you become more efficient, to upskill you. So managing those expectations is so crucial now, because we're literally in a industrial revolution. So we're going to see some major changes happen over the next 5 years. And as a leader in that space, you have to prepare for it, and you have to prepare your people for it as well.
Good. Great note to finish on, Reinaldo. It's been great having you on CTO Confessions, sir.